All right, so get this. There's this toad, and get this, the dad carries the babies on his back
Wow.
for weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the Iberian midwife toad.
Right.
Pretty incredible little creature.
That's a unique strategy for sure.
And that's what we're diving into today. It's not your average toad.
Yeah.
This one's got some seriously cool tricks when it comes to family matters.
Yeah, they really turn the traditional animal parenting roles upside down.
Right.
And that's just the beginning.
Okay, color me intrigued. The name midwife toad alone is enough to make me want to learn more. So where in the world can we find this remarkable amphibian?
Well, you'd have to travel to the Iberian Peninsula
Okay.
to see these guys, specifically southern Portugal and parts of Spain. There, it's officially known as Elates cisternacei and belongs to the Elatedae family, a special group of midwife toads.
Iberian Peninsula. Got it. So we're talking like sun-drenched Mediterranean landscapes.
Exactly.
But let's get back to this midwife thing. Not exactly a word that comes to mind when you think of toads. Usually it's more like, slimy and bumpy and warty.
Yeah, it's what makes them so captivating. It all boils down to their breeding behavior,
Okay.
which is far from typical.
All right, spill the tea. What's the deal with these midwife dads?
So picture this, it's breeding season. The males are out in full force serenading the females with their calls,
Okay.
particularly as the evening sets in.
So far sounds like your typical amphibian romance.
True, but here's where things get really interesting. After mating, the male takes on an extraordinary responsibility.
Okay.
He carries the fertilized eggs on his back.
Wait, hold up. The male carries the eggs, like physically backpacks them around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wraps the strands of eggs around his hind legs.
Wow.
Picture tiny little tadpole bundles.
Okay.
And he's on daddy duty until they hatch.
Wow, that's some serious dedication. Most amphibians just lay their eggs and move on, right?
Yeah, you're right. Most amphibians take a more hands-off approach.
So what evolutionary advantage does this unique parenting style offer?
Well, it provides crucial protection for the developing embryos.
Okay.
Keeps them safe from predators and environmental hazards.
So he's like a walking, hopping incubator.
He is a walking, hopping incubator. That's a great way to put it.
I'm getting a mental image of these dads hopping around with their little bundles of joy. I
Yeah.
love it. But before we get too carried away with their parenting skills, what do these toads actually look like?
Sure.
I mean, given their unique parenting role, I'm picturing something pretty large and imposing.
Not at all. The Iberian midwife toad is actually quite small,
Okay.
only reaching about 4 to 5 centimeters long.
Oh, wow.
Think pocket-sized, not terrifying giant.
Gotcha.
They have a stocky build and that classic warty skin you'd expect from a toad.
So not exactly winning any beauty contests then.
No, not really, but those warts serve an important purpose.
Right. I imagine they're like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. That rough, warty skin acts as natural armor, helps protect them from predators.
And speaking of protection, don't they also have glands on their back and head that secrete toxins?
They do.
Hold on, toxins. Are we talking poisonous toads here?
Not poisonous in the sense that they'll kill you,
Okay.
but definitely not something you want to mess with.
Right.
These toxins deter predators, and here's the fascinating part. Research suggests that they might also protect the toad's skin from pathogens.
Interesting. So not only do they have armor and chemical warfare, they might also have this extra layer of defense against microscopic enemies.
It's true. These little guys are serious about staying safe.
Yeah, it seems like they've adapted to their environment in some pretty remarkable ways. But I'm ending, even with all their defenses, these toads are facing some serious challenges these days.
Unfortunately, you're right. The threats they face are primarily due to us,
Oh, no?
humans,
Okay.
and our impact on the environment. Remember how we talked about them being found in specific parts of the Iberian Peninsula?
Yeah.
Well, their range is shrinking,
Okay.
and that's a major concern for conservationists.
I'm sensing a theme here. Habitat loss.
Exactly. As humans continue to encroach on their territory, deforestation, draining wetlands, urbanization, their habitat is being fragmented,
Right.
making it harder for them to thrive. And then there's the added pressure of pollution.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can imagine those clear, slow-moving waters they need are pretty sensitive to pollution.
They are.
Can you elaborate a bit more on the specific types of human activities that are impacting the toad's range? Are certain industries or practices particularly detrimental?
Well, when we think about habitat loss, we often picture, large-scale deforestation or industrial development, but even seemingly small-scale changes like agricultural runoff or the introduction of invasive species can have a big impact on delicate ecosystems.
You've hit the nail on the head. For the Iberian midwife toad, are certain agricultural practices particularly problematic?
Yes. For example, the increased use of pesticides and herbicides
Oh.
can directly harm amphibians, while the intensification of farming can lead to the loss of those crucial breeding ponds and wetlands. And you mentioned invasive species, the introduction of non-native predators like certain fish or crayfish
Yeah.
can also disrupt the delicate balance of these ecosystems.
So it's a complex web of factors contributing to their habitat loss. But habitat loss and pollution are issues for many species. Is there anything uniquely challenging for the Iberian midwife toad?
Well, on top of everything else, there's the looming issue of climate change.
Right.
And for a species so dependent on specific environmental conditions, especially water availability for breeding, that's a big deal.
Climate change is such a huge, complex issue. It's hard to grasp how it impacts specific species.
Yeah.
Could you maybe paint a picture of how climate change is disrupting the Iberian midwife toad's breeding cycle?
Imagine those temporary pools and wetlands the toads rely on for breeding. With rising temperatures and altered rainfall patterns, those pools might dry up too quickly or they might not form at all.
Oh.
This means the toads might not have suitable places to lay their eggs, or the tadpoles might not have enough time to develop before the water disappears.
Wow, that's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
So what does all of this mean for the future of these little toads? Are they in serious trouble?
They're definitely a species of concern.
Okay.
But the good news is there are people working hard to protect them.
Okay.
Conservation efforts are crucial, and it's heartening to see the dedication and innovation being poured into their protection.
I'm relieved to hear that. Can you tell us more about these conservation efforts? What are scientists and researchers doing to protect these fascinating creatures?
Well, one of the key strategies is habitat preservation.
Okay.
Protecting those remaining wetland habitats is absolutely crucial. It's not just about putting up fences and keeping people out, though. It often involves designating protected areas, working with local communities to manage land use sustainably, and sometimes even acquiring land specifically for conservation purposes.
So it sounds like a real community effort.
It is.
It's not just scientists dictating what needs to be done, but rather working together to find solutions that benefit both people and wildlife. I love that. But I'm curious, how do you even begin to restore a habitat, especially one as delicate as a wetland?
It's a bit like putting the pieces of a puzzle back together, recreating the conditions these toads need to thrive. You might start by removing invasive species, then planting native vegetation to provide cover and stabilize the soil. Often it involves reestablishing the natural water flow, perhaps by removing dams or culverts that were disrupting the ecosystem.
Okay.
And of course, addressing any sources of pollution is essential.
That's fascinating. I'm picturing a team of dedicated people out there knee-deep in mud planting reeds and restoring these vital ecosystems. It must be incredibly rewarding to see a degraded habitat come back to life. But I imagine there are also challenges in restoring these habitats, right?
You're absolutely right. One of the biggest challenges is dealing with the legacy of human impact. Wetlands that have been drained, polluted, or fragmented can be incredibly complex to restore. It requires careful planning, a deep understanding of the ecosystem, and a lot of patience. Sometimes you're essentially trying to reverse decades of change, and that takes time and resources.
I bet it does. But it sounds like the work is well worth it. Are there any success stories? Any examples of restored habitats where the Iberian midwife toad is making a comeback?
There are, actually. And those success stories are what keep conservationists going. In Portugal, for instance, there's been some great work done to restore temporary ponds in key areas. By recreating the right conditions, these projects have seen a resurgence in Iberian midwife toad populations.
That's incredible. It's like proof that we can make a difference if we put in the effort. But habitat preservation and restoration are just part of the picture, right?
Right.
What other strategies are being employed to protect these toads?
Another crucial aspect is population monitoring.
Okay.
Researchers are constantly collecting data on population size, distribution, and health to track trends and identify areas where conservation efforts need to be focused.
So it's not just about fixing the habitat. It's also about tracking how the toads are doing within those habitats. What kind of data do they collect, and how does that inform conservation strategies?
Researchers use a variety of methods, including surveys, trapping, and even DNA analysis to track population trends, assess genetic diversity, and identify potential threats.
Wow.
For example, if they notice a decline in a particular area, they can investigate the cause and adjust their conservation efforts accordingly.
It's amazing how much science and technology goes into protecting a species like this. It's almost like detective work.
It is a lot like detective work.
But I imagine there's also an element of public engagement involved.
Absolutely. Education and outreach are vital. The more people understand about the importance of biodiversity and the threats facing species like the Iberian midwife toad, the more likely they are to support conservation efforts.
Right. It's not just about scientists working in isolation. It's about engaging the community, getting people excited about these creatures and inspiring them to take action. So what are some ways that everyday folks can get involved in amphibian conservation? Do we need to become wetland restoration experts?
Not at all. There are many ways to contribute, even if you don't have a scientific background. One of the simplest and most effective ways is to support organizations dedicated to amphibian conservation.
Okay.
There are many groups, both local and international, doing incredible work to protect these creatures.
I'm all for putting my money where my mouth is.
Yeah,
But what about those of us who want to be a bit more hands-on? Are there ways to contribute on a more personal level?
absolutely. Volunteering is a fantastic way to make a direct impact. Many organizations rely on volunteers for tasks like habitat restoration, monitoring populations, and even educating others about amphibian conservation.
Okay.
You could be out there planting native vegetation, removing invasive species, or helping to collect data on toad populations.
I love that. It's not just about writing a check. It's about rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty for a good cause. But conservation isn't just about big projects and organized efforts, is it? It's also about the choices we make in our everyday lives.
You're right, it all ties together. Our everyday actions have an impact on the environment whether we realize it or not. Even small changes can make a difference.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of choices are we talking about?
Well, for starters, we can be mindful of our water usage.
All right.
Remember, these toads depend on clean, healthy water sources. So reducing our water consumption at home, fixing leaks, and being mindful of what we put down the drain, all of those things can contribute to a healthier aquatic environment.
Makes sense.
Oh,
Every drop counts. What else can we do?
another important aspect is being aware of the products we buy and use.
Oh, good.
Pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers can have devastating impacts on amphibians and other aquatic life. So opting for eco-friendly alternatives, or even better, reducing our reliance on these chemicals altogether can make a big difference.
Those are all great tips, and I think they highlight something really important. Conservation is a collective effort. It's not just about scientists and researchers doing their thing. It's about all of us making choices that support a healthy planet.
Exactly. We're all interconnected, and the choices we make in our daily lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while the challenges are real, it's inspiring to see the efforts being made to protect these toads and their habitats. It gives me hope for the future.
I feel the same way. The dedication of researchers, the passion of conservationists, and the growing awareness among the public are all reasons for optimism.
You know, this deep dive has given us a lot to think about, not just about the Iberian midwife toad itself, but about our role in protecting the incredible biodiversity of our planet. I think this toad story is a perfect example of how a seemingly small creature can have a big impact.
I couldn't agree more. The Iberian midwife toad, with its unique adaptations and its vital role in its ecosystem, serves as a powerful symbol of the importance of conservation. By understanding their story, we gain a deeper understanding of our own place in the natural world and the choices we can make to create a more sustainable future.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this episode?
I want them to remember that even seemingly small actions can have a ripple effect. Whether it's donating to a conservation organization, volunteering your time, or simply being more mindful of your everyday choices, you have the power to make a difference. The fate of the Iberian midwife toad and countless other species rests in our collective hands.
That's a powerful message, and one that I hope will inspire our listeners to take action. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of the Iberian midwife toad.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the wonders of our planet. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. It really is a reminder that even small changes in our habits can make a big difference for these creatures thousands of miles away.
It's incredible how interconnected everything is.
Ah.
So we've talked about habitat loss and pollution, but is there anything uniquely challenging for the Iberian midwife toad?
Well, on top of everything else, there's the looming issue of climate change.
Right.
And for a species that's so dependent on specific environmental conditions, especially water availability for breeding, that's a major concern.
Climate change is such a massive and complex issue. It's hard to grasp how it impacts specific species like this. Could you maybe paint a picture for us of how climate change is disrupting the Iberian midwife toad's breeding cycle?
So imagine those temporary pools and wetlands
Yeah.
that the toads rely on for breeding. With rising temperatures